secrecy, deception, discernment, cleverness and persuasion. This is where nations can overcome or gain preeminence over one another. Exploiting the weakness of internal divisions of another nation. Exploiting another nation's mythology, fantasies and religion. Discerning another nation's intentions, secrets, abilities and disabilities. These represent power in terms of nations influencing and gaining preeminence over one another. Many nations employ seers, and seers have very specific functions as interpreters, as locators, in serving defensive purposes, in serving business contracts, and in overseeing a nation's own internal needs and potential for disorder. The free nations have seers as well. Their seers are employed for the same purposes, but they are guided by a deeper knowledge, which can make them more powerful and more penetrating than the seers employed in nations that are not free. This gives the free nations power and a certain degree of advantage that must remain hidden from foreign awareness and scrutiny. Ultimately, the most powerful races in the universe are entirely hidden. And if they have any trade at all, it is maintained with the greatest secrecy and usually carried out by other nations that support them, that act as proxies for them. If you attain great power in the mental environment, your powers would be sought by other nations. Your skills would be sought by other nations, and other nations will attempt to seduce you or induce you through promises of wealth, splendor or high social positions, whatever they can do to seduce you in order to gain control of these abilities. The greatest expressions of power in the mental environment are guided by knowledge, which is entirely ethical and entirely peaceful in intent. Individuals possessing this cannot be turned and cannot be seduced. Yet they still must remain hidden. This is one of the great dilemmas of life in the universe, and it is true even within your own world, that those who are most powerful, those that have the greatest degree of skill, must remain hidden, or they will simply be used by political powers, commercial powers and the powers of religious institutions. They will be used as tools to carry out activities that are unethical and destructive. It is like the person who possesses great material wealth. Very difficult it is to hide this from others. Even if you create the appearance of poverty, the evidence of your material wealth will always be there. Therefore, if a nation possesses tremendous material wealth and resource wealth, and it seeks to remain free and beyond foreign intervention and persuasion, it must keep these things in the greatest of secrecy and not demonstrate them to any degree at all. This of course is nearly impossible when surrounded by trading nations, or if you are involved in the activities of trade, where everyone is always looking for wealth and advantage. That is again why free societies remain discreet and distinct and involve themselves in trade only to a very minimum, if at all. This is more difficult for a nation living outside a highly inhabited part of space, where there is social order, to maintain its hidden position because others can intervene without restraint. Invasion occurs. But living in the shadows in the midst of highly developed parts of space where there is tremendous social order requires restraint. If outside invasion is forbidden, then a nation can, according to the rules of engagement such as exist in your region of space, maintain a private existence with a minimum of foreign scrutiny. But even here, the seers amongst technological societies will try to discern the power and capabilities of the free societies. Their scrutiny must then be offset by the seers of the free societies. This is competition at another level. It is persuasion at another level. It is the fundamental problem of possessing knowledge and wealth in the universe. How does one possess knowledge and wealth and yet remain free? It is a problem for which there is no easy solution. It is a dilemma in life. Not all dilemmas have solutions. Not all problems have solutions. Because humanity does not yet experience itself living in a competitive environment beyond the borders of its world, it has not had to evolve to deal with these kinds of problems. But eventually it will. You are having to do this even at this moment, since the world is undergoing intervention from economic collectives, whose ethics you could not agree with and whose methods are entirely self-serving. This is the beginning of growing up and dealing with life at a more mature level. Eventually, every race in the universe has to face this. It is part of your destiny. The importance of persuasion is obvious to you now, but in dealing with other races whose temperament and intellectual abilities and orientation are far different from your own, the power of persuasion becomes much more complex and difficult. Persuasion within your own race is one thing. But between races that are dissimilar, it is entirely another matter. Your logic and reason may not work at all with them. Your ability to rationalize with them may be extremely limited. What they value and what you value may be entirely different. They may have a particular tradition or persuasion or set of anxieties that are very unique to their history and circumstances. To understand this, to comprehend this, to speak to this and to be persuasive here requires a level of educational skill far beyond what human diplomacy has ever had to establish. If you could, imagine trying to negotiate with an intelligence that was like a dolphin, except that intelligence had technology and represented a significant power. You want to negotiate for trade, you want to negotiate to establish rules of trade or engagements or mutual needs for security. How would you do it? And how could you ever persuade that intelligence? Where is it weak enough to be persuaded? Where is its weakness? Where is its strength? This is why it takes such great skill to negotiate and communicate. When you have larger assemblies of nations on councils, on trading councils dealing with problems in international trade or relations, problems of crime, problems of trafficking dangerous materials or drugs or illegal trade, it becomes very complex. You are now speaking to maybe 50 different nations using common trade languages which have been established over time. They are there with their interpreters. They are there with their seers. Everyone is trying to communicate together. Some use language. Some do not use language. They all use written language or symbols. They all understand an established trade language, whatever that language may be in a larger district. How do you come to agreement and consensus? This makes negotiations very long and complex. Yet sophistication and time have shown ways to accomplish things, even given these difficulties. There is communication, and then there is persuasion. Persuasion requires a very refined set of skills. You want another nation to see your point of view. You want another nation to value what you value. You want another nation to come to terms that are agreeable and preferred by you. You want another nation to do certain things or not to do certain things. You want to forge agreements and councils. This requires persuasion. This persuasion is not only based upon the strengths of one's argument, it is based upon the awareness of another's comprehension and skills, another's nature and orientation, another's strengths and another's weaknesses. Persuasion is carried out for entirely beneficial purposes, and it is also carried out for extremely selfish purposes, for the interests of one nation alone. That is why in highly inhabited regions such as your own, where trade has been long established, innovation comes very slowly. Once a practice or a system has been established and maintained, it is very hard to change it. If it has proven itself to be stable and beneficial to the majority of participants, it is very hard to change it, and innovations or improvements that are recommended or introduced can be greatly resisted. Even necessary change, even beneficial change, can be greatly resisted. The more nations and individuals involved, the more difficult it is to create consensus. Only if a network of nations or large trading associations are threatened clearly by some external force, unless this occurs, it is very difficult to create change and even improvements in the methods and rules of trade and conduct and so forth. Here you are dealing with nations that have very different social structures. Some of these structures would seem absolutely abhorrent to you. How do you communicate to other beings in this situation? Are you going to try to change them? Do you want to try to improve them? Do you want to recommend different alternatives to them? Are they open to this? Are they willing to consider it, or do they consider your recommendations to be an insult, an affront? How do you maintain trust? How do you present the possibilities for change in such a way that other nations are not threatened? The finesse of diplomacy here must be very great.